Welcome to the worldwide free seminar of the Family Dog Project, live from Budapest. The event is proudly sponsored by Purina.
There is a general impression among naïve dog lovers that dog's mind works in a somewhat childlike manner. Although this naive belief has long been rejected by scientists, the situation in the last few years has radically changed. First of all, it's increasingly accepted that dogs differ from many other animal species by virtue of the fact that they have a very unique evolutionary history, and they adapted their social behavior to cohabitate with human beings. Dogs' human-tunedness manifests itself, for example, in their strong childlike attachment with their owner, as well as in their ability to respond to human emotional changes. Even more importantly, the sophisticated communication skills are also among the hallmarks of dogs' human-infant likeness. In order to gain a deeper insight into this phenomenon, first let's see a question: what is peculiar about the way human infant and mother engage in communication? Let's see a so-called triadic communication situation, which includes a mother, a signaler, a recipient, a preverbal baby, and a target object, a toy in the mother's hand. Such triadic or shared engagement can be frequently observed even between mother and her preverbal infants, as well as in dog-human interactions. A characteristic feature of such triadic engagement is that the mother can actively and effectively coordinate her infant's attention by using the so-called ostensive and referential signals. Probably many of you are unfamiliar with the terms ostensive and referential, so let's take a closer look on the question: what do these terms mean? By means of ostensive signals, a mother can efficiently capture her infant's attention because these signals effectively manifest the mother's communicative intention. Such signals, for example, eye contact and verbal addressing, calling the baby by his or her name, and using motherese, baby talk, can effectively facilitate and trigger an attentive, ready to interact attitude from the baby. In addition, the so-called referential signals are signals by means of which a mother can specify what she is informing about. Pointing gesture or other directional gestures, for example, have clear referential meaning, and even a preverbal infant can understand the designating function of these signals. That is, these signals refer to an object, an event, or a location in the environment. All in all, it seems that these two characteristics, responsiveness to ostensive signals and the ability to understand the designating function of referential signals, are the key components of mother-infant communicative interactions. Okay, but what about dogs? Until recently, it has been widely accepted that the understanding of the communicative value of human pointing gesture is unique to human. And there are only surface similarities between dogs and human infants concerning their pointing following behavior. And dogs, unlike babies, use pointing gesture just as a discriminative stimulus. And dogs have poor, if any, insights into their human partner's communicative intention. Okay, at the same time, however, increasing evidence suggests that even very young dog puppies can reliably utilize human pointing gestures, and adult dogs, adult family dogs, well-socialized family dogs, can show a performance similar to that of 1.5-year-old baby. Until recently, however, it's still highly debated whether dogs understand the designating function of human pointing gesture, and whether pointing, this human-specific communicative gesture, fulfills a function for dogs similar to that of human infants. If the answers to these questions are yes, then we can hypothesize that dogs are sensitive to the sequential connectedness of the ostensive and referential signals, and human pointing is conceived as referential informing gesture if and only if the gesture is preceded by signals indicating the actor's communicative intention. In our study, we tested this hypothesis to see how dogs respond to human pointing gesture in a situation in which human pointing gesture is either preceded by ostensive addressing signals, making eye contact with the dog and calling the dog by its name, and this was followed by pointing, or in another situation in which pointing is followed by the same ostensive addressing signals. Our hypothesis was that dogs will tend to show a better performance in those situations in which pointing gesture is preceded by the ostensive signals, that is, signals which can express the human helper's communicative intention. That is, dogs will perform better in the so-called communicatively relevant condition. Our study was very simple. Dogs were presented with a so-called two-object choice situation in which a human experimenter pointed to one of the two identical plastic containers. After a short familiarization period during which the dogs were familiarized with the task situation, subjects participated in two different conditions. All subjects participated in both conditions. In the so-called relevant action sequence condition, the experimenter first addressed the dog in a communicative manner, established eye contact with the dog and called the dog by its name, and then momentarily pointed to one of the two identical containers. And the third step of this human action sequence was clapping of hands. This is a non-ostensive, non-communicative attention getter. And in the other condition, in the irrelevant condition, the first and third step of the human action sequence was swapped. That is, the experimenter first clapped his hands and then pointed momentarily and finally used ostensive addressing signals, established eye contact with the dog and called the dog by its name. Okay, so the essence of the situation was that human pointing gesture embedded in different sequences of the same, very same human action, three-step human action. Okay, let's see the results. The analysis of the proportion of correct choices showed that dogs could follow human pointing gesture only in the so-called communicatively relevant situation, that is, in those trials in which the human pointing gesture is preceded by the eye contact and the verbal addressing of the dog. And in the irrelevant signal sequence condition, they selected randomly from among the containers. This 57% didn't differ significantly from the 50% change level. Okay, so the conclusion of our first study is that it seems that the sequential connectedness of ostensive and referential signals is important for dog. It seems that ostensive addressing, that is the overt expression of the human's communicative intent, has the potential to change how dogs interpret the subsequent referential gesture. That is, it seems that dogs need communicative addressing to understand the referential nature of subsequent pointing gesture. And at the same time, the non-ostensive attention getter, clapping of hands, cannot fulfill the same function. Okay, but experiments on infants clearly showed that there are two possible ways of understanding pointing gesture as referential signal. For example, 6-month-old babies follow human pointing gesture reflexively towards a direction. It seems that they use human pointing gesture as a spatial cue, indicating a particular direction or location. In contrast, older than 1-year-old babies can understand that pointing gesture is an object, a target-related gesture. They use human pointing gesture as a referential signal indicating a target object in the environment. We don't know, however, whether dogs use pointing gesture as referential signal, as a spatial cue indicating location where to do something, or alternatively they use these gestures as signals indicating a target object, an object which can be manipulated somehow. In the second study, we investigated this question. The situation was fairly similar to that of the first study. This was a two-way objectual situation in which a human experimenter pointed momentarily at one of two potential target objects, and subjects participated in an A-trial session. The first step of the experiment was that the experimenter captures the dog's attention by using the so-called ostensive signals, established eye contact with the dog and called the dog by its name, and then he pointed momentarily at one of the two plush toys. These were target objects. We had a set of 4 plush toys, a red bear and yellow piglet and a brown kangaroo and a beige rabbit. And we used different pairs of plush toys in different trials. And after pointing, the experimenter switched the location of the two toy objects by grabbing the objects and then making a 180 turn around. And finally, he put the objects on the ground and stepped back, and the dog was allowed to make a choice. So this situation is an ambiguous situation to dogs because there is a dissociation between the location indicated by the pointing gesture and the target object indicated by the pointing gesture. And this way we can see whether dogs tend to follow the location or the target object as the consequence of the pointing gesture. Our results show we analyzed the so-called difference score. Difference score analysis was based on the number of trials in which dogs selected the location and the number of trials in which dogs selected the target object. And in this figure you can see that dogs show a high positive value on this difference score scale, which means that they show a strong and significant bias to the cued location, and they seemingly ignore the target object indicated by the pointing gesture. Okay, so what are the conclusions? It seems that there are striking similarities between dogs and preverbal infants concerning their gesture reading skills, and these similarities seemingly go beyond the surface similarities. So these deeper than surface similarities. It seems that dogs, like infants, are capable of gaining insight into their human partner's communicative intention, and the ostensive signals can raise a strong referential expectation about subsequent directional gestures. However, it's also important to mention that, dogs' understanding of human pointing gesture is somewhat preverbal infant-like. They tend to interpret human pointing similar to 6-month-old babies like a spatial cue and not as a target object-related gesture. Okay, and what should my take-home message for dog owners be? It seems that we need to communicate our dogs in a childlike manner. Dogs, in many situations, a well-socialized family dog effortlessly understand what the human behavior is about. And they seemingly interpret human communicative behavior similarly to that of the interpretations of human infants. And this is a shared characteristic of dog-human and mother-infant interaction. I think that this is what makes a dog our best companion animal on an intuitive level, so childlike for us. And for those who are more interested in the details of these studies, I suggest reading the papers indicated here. And okay, then thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for the talk.